Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piz. Ukraine War News Update, second part there, a very short one for the 22nd of December 2024. I have to go out and do some last minute Christmas shopping, where I will be waddling around with the shopping precinct or shopping centre with my very poor legs, foot dragging around and having to take various stops every so often. I'll probably just end up sitting down having a meal or something. Anyway, let's start with Norway in our military aid video. Norway has extended its support for Ukraine beyond 2030. So remember, let's do a bit of rewinding. We were talking at the beginning of my reporting on this war that countries were giving aid to Ukraine, left, right and centre at the time. The beginning of the war, it kind of ramped up to be more and more serious aid. And it was Norway who first started to consider giving aid over a longer period rather than ad hoc aid packages and saying, right, here's some aid, okay, here's a little bit more aid. They said, right, we're going to give you aid and we're going to structure it over 2020, well, at the time it's probably 2022, maybe 2023, for the next 5 years. So we're going to 2028 type time period. And that was really good because that was a message to Putin that we're in this for the long haul. Like, you think you're going to outlast us, but if we're structuring aid to Ukraine over this period of time, then it means that we aren't going to be outlasted by you type thing. And Norway were at the head of that. It was really good. Well, here they've extended its support beyond 2030 with a record 3 billion euros pledged for 2025. And I've already reported that 3 billion euros. It's kind of tripled their aid from the year before. And we talked about how the National Wealth Fund has been able to sustain that increase there. Now, the funds will be split between military and civilian aid. And Norway emphasizing its commitment to assist Ukraine both during and after the end of the war. So that's awesome, Norway. Big shout out to Stephen Bendal. Thanks for your support. I'll hopefully speak to you in the new year. Right. Russian embassy, says the Kyiv Independent, condemns the UK's plan to use frozen Russian assets for Ukraine aid. The Russian embassy in whatever country you care to imagine is invariably just a big bunch of arse. They say things that are typical for almost a comedic dictatorial propagandist agenda. Russian embassy condemns the UK plan to use frozen Russian assets for Ukraine aid. The Russian embassy in London criticised the UK's plan to transfer more than £2 billion, 2.5 billion euros, to Ukraine using those assets, calling it a fraudulent scheme. Okay, well, you want to call that a fraudulent scheme? I will call your invasion of Ukraine a genocidal, dictatorial plan for a narcissistic megalomaniac. Take that, Russian embassy. Poland has delivered 2 Mi-8 transport helicopters and 1 Bell 412HP medium transport helicopter. So that's really good news there. They have been transferred to Ukraine. Indeed, we can see them here in more pictures showing you some helicopters. That's really good. See, the Mi-8s get used quite a bit by the Ukrainian armed forces. Bell 412HP helicopter, I guess, is going to be of use as well. I don't know how that will be utilised, but good stuff from Poland. And speaking of Poland, according to Ukrainian Review, the Polish defence minister said that Poland has prepared and strengthened its air defence system, and Rzeszów Airport has been transferred. Who puts Z after an R? Like, no one does that at the beginning of a word. Well, apparently they do. The Poles do that. So, apologies, Poland. I am not denigrating your language. However, I am. Like, who starts a word with R and then goes Z, and then has another Z later after an S? Like, none of this makes any sense to an English speaker. Okay. Yeah. So, Rzeszów Airport has been transferred. Oh, you can do it. Has been transferred to NATO protection. This is potentially NATO taking more of a front seat position in organising and coalescing the forces, the allied forces, more so than the US. As the US steps back, I think NATO is stepping forward. Quote, if our airspace is violated, the missile or drone will be shot down, we will do this if it is physically possible. Is that saying now that they are going to shoot down Russian missiles that enter Polish airspace? Because that is significant. I would like some clarity on that. That could be really good news. Now, I talked about the Montreux Convention yesterday, and just to let you know what goes on with the Montreux Convention, let's go and see a map of the Black Sea. So the map of the Black Sea, if we go on to the here we have the map here. Okay, so Black Sea, Crimea. I've long told you that Crimea was important for the Russians due to Sevastopol being a deep sea warm water port, but it's a large port and it has really good port infrastructure. So that port allows there are dry docks, there are all sorts of abilities to defend that port, as you can see, but also it's deep and it doesn't freeze over and it's got quite a big capacity. Now that that's kind of out of use for the Russian Navy, they have to go to Novorossiysk, but this is not deep sea, like as in, yeah, there looks like there's a port there, but that's a cargo port that's not good enough for the Russian Navy, and they actually have to moor their ships out here. So the Black Sea is super, super important for Russia to be able to access Crimea, Sevastopol, to then be able to get out of the Bosphorus Straits here in Istanbul. As you can see, very thin stretch of water there that gets you out of the Black Sea and into the Mediterranean. It's still difficult to navigate. And that gives you access to the Mediterranean, which itself gives you access to the Atlantic, or the Mediterranean gives you access to the Red Sea that allows you to get out to the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, etc., etc. So this, for Russia to be here, is massively, massively important. And I think underwrites largely why Russia chose to invade. They really want a land corridor that stretches from Moldova right across to Russia, so that Ukraine is not able to use this for export industry, and Russia would be able to. They'd have Odessa, which is a hugely important port. They'd have the ports like Reni and Ishmael on the Danube River as well. And that means, if Russia had that, it would be incredibly important, both from a commercial and from a naval point of view. And they could use that as their center of influence for the world, because otherwise they have to rely on ports that freeze over winter, or seas that freeze over winter, ports that are just miles away from anywhere they want to be. Vladivostok, yeah, great for the Pacific Ocean up here in the north, but again freezes over, and it's it's not around the center of the world as one might see it, where everything's happening. You've got Africa, Middle East, Europe, etc., etc. And St. Petersburg is an issue because it has to go all the way through here, so on and so forth. So Black Sea is hugely important. And as such, the Montreux Convention is this 1931, was it, agreement where, because Turkey own Istanbul, they get to close the Bosphorus Straits when there is a war taking place between nations bordering the Black Sea. And with the outbreak of the war in 2022, the Russians didn't plan on this being a war, right? So they planned on a three-day military operation that would see the deposing of the government and implementing a pro-Russian regime in Kiev. That didn't happen, and then it accidentally became a war. So it was never meant to be a war. And because it wasn't supposed to be a war, they didn't plan for a war, which is why you had all of these vehicles and everything stuck up here, because they weren't planning on a war and had the wrong sort of vehicles, the wrong time of year. This is February, to move huge amounts of vehicles. It was an absolute fustercluck. It just went completely wrong for the Russians straight away, due to planning for a very different thing. Now, as soon as they met that resistance, things got problematic for them. But the other thing they didn't do, because it wasn't going to be a war, is pile the Black Sea full of their Arctic fleet, the northern fleets and whatnot. So they didn't have the full might of the Russian naval forces, which is significant. And had they had that, they would have just hammered Kiev from the sea. They would have hammered Ukraine from the sea, and Ukraine wouldn't have been. I'm positive that was a single reason that Ukraine was able to survive, is that you only had, with the closing of the Bosphorus Straits, you only had the Russian fleet that was in the Black Sea at the time. They can't get any other submarines or surface vessels into Ukraine, into the Black Sea, to help out with their war efforts, and neither can Ukraine, right? Now, Thierry Schmidlin has sent me this, saying, actually copied a comment here from a YouTube News 2 video, or YT News 2 video. The Montreux Convention can be bypassed for some vessels, not too large ones, but if you're able to load a vessel on a semi-submersible commercial vessel, or maybe load a semi-submersible on a commercial vessel, the cargo of commercial ships is not controlled by the Montreux Convention. So that's interesting. So perhaps there are things that can come through, and this has been an issue with regard to commercial vessels. So, you know, are grain ships carrying weapons to Ukraine, would be the question that the Russians have been asking, and likewise, are oil or cargo ships for Russia carrying military equipment to the Russians? Well, quite possibly, quite probably, and there's nothing the Montreux Convention can do about that. They just stop vessels. So if you might get a situation, I don't know how realistic it is, but you might be able to get like a small submarine or a small cargo or a small vessel, you know, on a larger cargo vessel. I don't know if that's a thing, if the Russians have indeed done that. Sorry, that's a lot of preamble to a very minor point, but it's worth talking about the Montreux Convention and getting a sense of, you know, how important that tiny stretch of water is geographically for the Black Sea, and how important the Black Sea is really for Russia, for their influence operations on the whole world. And, you know, that goes for Tartus as well in Syria, where you've got this port that is incredibly important for the Russians, as they have their naval vessels there. And, you know, especially since the Bosphorus Straits being closed, this then becomes their de facto Russian naval port. Yeah. Okay. Right. So loud explosions at the gunpowder plant in Kazan, as I explained this morning. It's going to be important to see. I think there's going to be an uptick in Ukrainian strikes with R-360 Neptunes, Palyanitsia, I think that's correct. SK keeps correcting me. Missile drones, and also the Peklo, the Hell missile drones. If they scale those up properly, you're going to start seeing strikes, I think, on the industrial military complex of the Russians. In this case, hitting potentially gunpowder plant in Kazan. So that might affect their production schedules. Now, transferred self-propelled howitzers and ballistic missile launchers from North Korea to Russia. We keep seeing these, including ballistic missile launchers. If that could be a problem, where we might see more and more of these KN-23 missiles being launched, you know, ballistic missiles that the Ukrainians struggle to shoot down, right? More of those get to the Russians, and yeah, it is an issue. The North Korean provision for the Russians is an issue. So here, again, North Korea has reportedly supplied Russia with another batch of M1989 Koksan self-propelled guns, and reportedly also the Pukguksong-2 long-range ballistic missiles, according to Russian mill bloggers. The missile systems were spotted on a railway convoy. Estimated range of those missiles is around 2,000 kilometers, with a max altitude of 550 kilometers, say the Western analysts. And finally, we're going to go to a bit of an issue for the Ukrainians, and I can't tell you how much of a problem this is going to be. So the first thing to note of this video is, one, beard. I mean, the man, there's no doubt about this, but the Russian clergy have beards. They definitely have beards. Okay, let's read through what he says. And yet, there are no atheists in war, says your man here. When you face physical death, all the fibres of the soul come alive. I've got some theological problems with this, by the way. And how many remarkable testimonies are there now of Christ's victory over death? Ooh, where's he going with this? My own wife sends me a lot of military testimonies and clips. Ooh, they must be true. Let's have a look. During Lent, I watched a video about a Chinese man who participated in a special military operation. Okay, interested. Keep going. Received a bullet in the stomach that shredded all his intestines. And he died from this and was resurrected. Oh my goodness. St. Luke of Crimea appeared to him, healed him completely. His intestines were healed. This must be true. This is an incredible testimony here. And then he gets baptized. His relatives arrive, and there they all are in white garments, newly baptized adepts of our Orthodox Church. My goodness. And this is not the only miraculous testimony. Wow. Of the resurrected Saviour of warriors, laying down life for others as for his brothers. Oh my goodness. So, interesting claim here coming from the Russian Orthodox Church is that the Russians are utilizing now zombie armies and zombie soldiers. This is definitely a worry. This could be a game changer, actually, to be quite honest. Because essentially, Bearded Man says so. And because Bearded Man says so, it's almost certainly true. Because Bearded Man's wife says so. She's seen some clips online, therefore it's true. I might go and look back at those flat earth videos that I've dismissed. I think, because I saw them online, they're probably true as well, actually. Damn. My goodness. It appears that virtually all conspiracy theories might actually be true. Thanks for that, Bearded Man. So Bearded Man tells us that apparently there are resurrected Chinese soldiers fighting for the Russians. I would sound the alarm bells on that. I think that's probably more important than tons of North Korean equipment being sent to the front lines. Let me know what you think. Is that something we should be worrying about? And should we be doing our own research into resurrecting troops? Should we start a biolab somewhere that ends up resulting in zombified humans? Because there'll almost certainly be a leak and it'll get out and we'll have zombified. Oh, speaking of which, it's almost Christmas, guys. I'm sure Amazon can get you these books delivered just before Christmas Day. Survival of the Fittest Metamorphosis by Johnny Pierce. I'm online. I'm Johnny Pierce for my fiction and Jonathan M.S. Pierce for my philosophy. Survival of the Fittest adaptation is a sequel to that. Please go and check those books out. Let me know what you think of my writing of fiction concerning these kind of outbreaks and pandemics and maybe resurrected soldiers. I have to look into that. Anyway, take care, guys. Speak to you soon. Toodle pips.